your product needs to be somehow targeting one of the hallmarks of aging. Otherwise, you're not doing skin longevity, right? Just because your skin is more hydrated, this is not skin longevity.
Hey, Erum, what's going on?
Hey, Karl. Wow. Another episode of the Grow Everything podcast where we talk about how biotech is transforming every industry. And we saw it firsthand when we went to London to Biofabricate's Biofab Fair, which was an incredible conference.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to talk too much about that right now because we're going to have a full episode just specifically about the Biofab Fair. But I will say it was great to see a lot of the people that we know and to see the advances that people are making when it comes to using biology as a technology specifically for manufacturing materials. Is there one highlight you want to tease to our audience at this point?
Well, there's a couple. I will say that we did a live recording and it will be our 150th episode. The episode you're listening to right now is 148th. So you're going to have to wait a couple episodes. And we have some guests that we interviewed. We had a couple of our former guests that were at the conference and they joined us and gave us updates in their world. So I think one of the highlights for me was seeing some people that were previously on the Grow Everything podcast going down new ventures. They take their learnings and they leveled up what they're doing. And I think that's a very powerful message because a lot of technology is converging. A lot of new business models are coming out. A lot of partnerships are being made or falling apart. But this is business. This is like, I want to say cutthroat. I would say like, this is business happening like before our eyes with the people we know. And it's great to see how they evolve. So I think you guys are in for a treat. So stay tuned to episode 150, which is our live recording from the Biofab Fair in London.
Yeah, and I think what I would say too, just to add to that, is you're right. It's, business seems like it can be cutthroat, but really it's like this evolution of business and people take learnings from previous companies. That's the way it should be. And applying those learnings to a new company means perhaps you're going to be able to advance more quickly. And I think we are seeing that with some of the people we spoke to. And people who, like you said, have been on the podcast. So I'm super excited to have that episode and talk a little bit more about it as we go forward. Another thing that we did while we were in London was we met with a very large venture firm and talked about how biotech is impacting everything, including infrastructure.
Yeah. So this venture fund pretty much invests in everything. And again, we're teasing a little bit here, but they want to know. They want to know what's going on because it impacts the money that goes to the shareholders, right? So how can biotech reduce operational costs so that there's more margins or there's more profit being made and shared? And that's a lot. So Karl, you mentioned infrastructure, like we talked about in previous episodes where there's fermentation or continuous batch fermentation, talking about cell-free like Cascade Bio and Exozymes, talking about cell-free biomanufacturing. And a lot of that has reduced energy inputs that can be distributed, that can use different types of resources. And that can all address the bottom line of these companies so that they can, again, have more efficient operational costs and are able to have more value go up to the shareholders. So investors like to see that. And we talked about three things. Like you mentioned, infrastructure. We talked about the circular economy. And we talked about biopharma, of course, which is a big money maker. And it was great to really go down these different verticals because, Karl, you and I have seen so much with this podcast. And of course, in our day-to-day job of a lot of innovation coming online that are having these incremental changes through pilots, but they're scaling up like our friends that we saw at the Biofab Fair. And how do we then continue that scale up and not only go deep, but go wide? And I think that's a big part of this conversation. But what were your takeaways from those conversations? There were some big decision makers in that room.
I think one of the things I would say is we talk about biology as a technology. And I think oftentimes we're thinking about end products, or that's the things that people see because they're real. You can touch, you can feel it. You can't touch a process necessarily. You might not really understand how biology can impact a process and make it much more efficient. That sounds like something that is very abstract, but it is very real. And so I think maybe the analogy I would make is if you've got a brewery and you maybe tweak the process a little bit and you're able to create batches that are faster, you're able to produce that beer faster, or you're able to produce more wine with less grapes. If you think about it that way, and you think about an end product as being, for example, a medicine, I'm going to use the biopharma example. If you have a medicine, but you tweak the process and you're able to be 10, 20, 30% more efficient, then what you're doing is you're actually delivering more value. And so we are seeing biology and biotechnology being used in so many cases this way. And again, it sounds abstract, but its impact is not abstract at all. It is something that investors are looking at because it does make a difference to the bottom line.
Yeah, some investors, right? The investors that we meet, I think all investors need to look at how biology is transforming everything. And we know that some of our friends, like Julie Wolf from 2048 is a listener. We love when we talk about some of the things we mention here on the podcast when we see her in person. So shout out to Julie Wolf. And it's interesting because, when we talk about biotechnology to the uninitiated, they often think about pharma. That's the first thing they think about, because when we talk about efficiency in biotech, there's no other industry that has done it so efficiently than the pharmaceutical industry. And it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal, the infrastructure that has been built around pharmaceutical drugs to make these super valuable molecules at a low volume, at super high margins. And I guess it depends on what type of pharmaceutical drug you're talking about, whether they're generics versus a blockbuster cancer drug or something. That the cost varies. Let's leave it at that. But there's a lot of innovation that has come from pharma, or at least pharmaceutical research, that has spilled into the world of direct-to-consumer products. And I think that's part of a thesis or understanding that Karl, you and I talk about, maybe not as podcasts as much. And I think we have been, because we bring on unique companies that are not in pharmaceuticals. They are looking to transform every physical product. And we talked to a lot of startups in biopharma too, and they're trying to make a sale to the big pharma companies. And that's also very challenging because they're inundated with so much innovation and they have to make decisions. And that's challenging to change their process because it's a well-oiled machine, and you're a company coming from the outside saying, oh yeah, like if you just make all these changes, maybe you'll make more money. I don't know. Like that's a really hard sell. But this concept of taking new innovation that maybe started in like traditional biopharma or traditional biotech in that vein and bringing it to direct to consumer is fascinating, and something that we see when we're looking at peptides or novel molecules that could come from that type of research, but could be used in consumer products and goods. We see this oftentimes. One shining example of pharmaceutical research that got translated into a direct-to-consumer product is Splenda. Splenda, it was, again, being worked on for an industry that's highly regulated. And by accident, the researcher tasted this molecule or the product that they were making. In my understanding of the Splenda story, like they were trying to make a new type of sucralose and they were using it for something. And it was actually a very interesting accident where the researcher was told to test the molecule, but he heard to taste the molecule and then ended up tasting it and was like, oh, this is super sweet. And like they have to have done the tests and we're like, okay, well, generally regarded as safe, let's make this into a sweetener. And then lo and behold, J&J or McNeil is a company that does direct-to-consumer products for Johnson & Johnson, was like, all right, let's make this into some Splenda. Let's spin up some sweeteners. And then boom, that became a multi-billion-dollar industry, I'm sure. I don't know the exact numbers.
Yeah, so the exact number is $6 billion. And sucralose, which is the sweetener in Splenda, is projected to reach $8 billion in the early 2030s. So it's a significant market and just shows that a product that was being investigated for pharma, but then turned into a consumer product, can be extremely valuable. And I think that is the perfect transition into our guest today. Today, we're having an interview with Alessandra Zonari, one of the founders of OneSkin.
Yeah, I was super excited to talk to Alessandra because if you guys haven't heard of OneSkin, you must be living under a rock, because this is a longevity product. It has incredible research, which you'll hear about. And The quick story here, you'll hear a lot about this stemmed from cancer research. This idea looking at different peptides, which you'll learn more about, how it could be used for cancer therapy. But then a light bulb moment was like, okay, wait, this could be a direct-to-consumer company. This could be a skincare brand, and completely shifted the trajectory for Alessandra and her co-founders. And wow, this is an incredible story. You guys make sure you pay attention to what we talk about in this episode with Alessandra Zonari of OneSkin.
Dr. Alessandra Zonari of OneSkin, we are so thrilled to have you on the Grow Everything podcast.
I'm beyond excited to be here talking to you again, Karl, and to you, Erum. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much. So in getting into your background, and we're going to get into it, you've described yourself as a scientist who is driven by a personal mission. And since our listeners may not know your story, how did that shape the path for you in terms of becoming a scientist and also co-founding OneSkin?
Yeah. So I grew up in a small family in a small town in Brazil. So it was basically me, my sister, and my parents. I didn't have my grandparents from my father's side because they had passed early on in their lives by cardiovascular disease, cancer. I had a lot of other cancer cases in my dad's side. On my mom, my grandfather, when I was 10 years old, he also had pancreatic cancer. And my grandmother was already later on starting to have dementia. And when I was little age, 10 years, I was always afraid of getting old. I was like this thing of aging. I'll be sick. I will die. I was afraid that my parents will die early as my grandparents had. They would get a disease. And that shaped me to get into studying biology. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be discovering something, trying to discover the cure of cancer or trying to clone my family. I was 10, 11, 12 years on with all the cloning coming up. I want to clone my parents, and that's the solution. Maybe I will clone myself. And I was very funny and creative on all of that. So that was what shaped me to go to college and study biology and then research stem cells during my master's and PhDs. And I was always focusing my research on that time in academia on more on the regeneration. I'm trying to fix things. And it was only at OneSkin that my mindset changed and shifted to more understanding aging and being more preventative and the things that we can do to help ourselves, that I do not need to be afraid of my genetics. There's more than we can do. And that completely changed my mind. I felt more empowered about researching even and empowered about my personal life as well.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your story. I relate to it. I have family history where my parents have been sick. My father passed away, my grandparents, all because of cardiovascular cancer, all the things that you have mentioned. So I feel that sense of concern about our own aging. And aging has been taking a lot of different perspectives over the year. And a lot has started in the world of skincare, which is the world that OneSkin lives in. And many people think that skincare is surface level beauty. It's just something like on your face and you put makeup on it and that's it. But your position at OneSkin is that your skin is a window into cellular health and longevity. So walk us through that connection. How does targeting cellular senescence, and describe that a little bit for us, how does targeting that process, cellular senescence, in our largest organ connect to our broader health span? And how do you communicate that science in a way that resonates with consumers while staying true to the research?
Yeah. So, I was telling you that I was researching stem cells in academia and we wanted to cure diseases, right? And when we started OneSkin, what really excited us is that to find a cure of cancer is very hard. The steps to go through, the number of research, animal testing, and then FDA, it's a lot of work and needs billions of dollars of investments for research. We started to realize that the skin, because it's our largest organ, has a huge contribution to the aging process. Not only because of your appearance, because we want to look good about our skin, but the function of the skin throughout the aging process, it's important to maintain our health. And when that realization came out, we started, okay, there's something more interesting to research on skin that goes beyond the beauty space and that's really science and can improve health. So when we are aging, and doesn't matter, like if I'm talking about the skin or heart or our whole body accumulates damage, and these damaged cells we call zombie cells. They secrete inflammation and they start spreading this inflammation and degrading the surrounding tissue. So this is happening when we are getting older. And the consequences of having a lot of those zombie cells on your body is that you have more inflammation and deterioration of the tissue. So for the skin stop being that strong barrier for your body, because the skin has this function of a protective barrier. It also regulates water, temperature, and starts then accumulating more inflammation. And if your skin is getting more damage throughout aging and accumulation of these cells, because of its size, we believe that this inflammation can be driving more of the chronic diseases that happens with aging. So our approach for looking at the skin is like, if we keep our skin healthier throughout life, we are able to help our body to be on a better state. And maybe this can help us reduce the chances of starting chronic diseases later on in our lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you and OneSkin have been called pioneers of skin longevity. And longevity is a space that is very hot. We've been talking about it a fair amount here on Grow Everything. But how do you see the space evolving as more companies enter the territory? And what makes longevity, true longevity science, how's it separate from just marketing spin?
Yeah, I love to see now finally skin longevity getting more mainstream, because we started the company in 2016. And in our first years, we would talk about skin longevity and people would like, what are you talking about? And now we see we were investing on the right thing of researching skin aging through this lens of longevity. That for me, what it means, it's really keeping your skin healthier for longer. So for really doing that, your product needs to be somehow targeting one of the hallmarks of aging. Otherwise, you're not doing skin longevity, right? Just because your skin is more hydrated, this is not skin longevity. So a lot of companies now just label the product skin longevity serum, and it's vitamin C serum. It's just changing the marketing word. But what is behind that? The real longevity needs to have science that is around one of the hallmarks of aging. And the way the consumer can understand that, because it can be a little bit difficult, it's really trying to see, okay, they are talking about longevity and they're saying that they have science. What's behind? There is any kind of real publication. There are scientists in the team. What it should behind that brand, those words, science and skin longevity, that I can, trust that there's some research here being done.
Yeah, absolutely. And through your research, we have talked about, and you mentioned cellular senescence, and the solution that you arrived at was creating a peptide. So can you talk to us a little bit more about how a peptide affects cellular senescence? And could you share a moment when you realized that this was more than just a skincare ingredient, that this was a breakthrough that's going to help with our skin lifespan?
So to answer to your question, I would just go through how we started screen to get to this novel peptide. We started the company like building a platform, growing the lab, skin tissue from different ages so we can understand the aging process and what's driving the aging process. And when we start testing some products in the market, we were seeing that they were not targeting, they were not reducing what's causing aging on the skin. A lot of them was even like more pro-aging, like increasing inflammation than actually benefiting your skin, which was terrifying. So what we did to find that this OS1 peptide was do a screening, look for molecules, novel molecules that specifically would reduce one hallmark of aging, that's the senescent cells. So specifically, we were designing a molecule to now target the accumulation of this damage in the skin to reduce this inflammation that's accumulating on the skin. And what would be the result that we were expecting is that if we reduce at the cellular level this inflammation and this damage, your skin would be able to repair better, to have a better skin barrier, to produce more collagen. So that was all our hypothesis. And then we were seeing that there was no other molecules in the market specifically targeting that. So we went through a process, took us 2 years to do the screening and the validation. We identified over 900 peptides that we screened. This one that we call the OS1 peptide that we saw that could reduce the inflammation that the senescent cells secrete and can reduce the accumulation of more of those zombie cells, more things that we don't want on the skin. And then when we saw this data in the lab, the next question, because the result when we compared in the lab when we treat on skin was very clear. Like the skin reduced markers of cellular senescence and then increased skin barrier function and increased collagen. The question was, if we formulate this into a cream, will people see the benefits on visible signs of aging? And when we start to apply this topically and see the changes on the skin after the use of the product was when we were like, wow, we have something here. Let's continue. Let's bring this to the market.
That's amazing. And before I ask the next question, it took you guys a while to get from the skin samples to discovering the OS1 peptide to actually bringing a product to the market. Just so for the entrepreneurs and investors in our audience, how long did the process take before you guys came on the market?
Yeah, the process took us 5 years. So we started the company in 2016. We started doing this platform for screening. We started screening skin aging and testing different products. And then we started to look for novel molecules. We identified this OS1. We validated in vitro. We formulated. We did a clinical study, and we brought it to the market. It took us 5 years, which for a skincare product, it's a lot. For a therapeutic approach, it's fast. So if we were going to try to cure a disease or prevent a disease with a molecule, we would take 15 years to go through all the process and get this into the market. So the route of the skin and being cosmetic and topical application was a way that expedited the process for us as a scientist to bring this technology from the bench to a product and into the market.
That's amazing. I mean, I just think it shows so much about how long it actually takes things to get to market. And I like the comparison that you made is if comparing like a beauty product or a cosmetic product to the amount of time it takes to get to market with a pharmaceutical product. It takes so much longer. Now, one thing that I've always loved about OneSkin is you guys have built this company with radical transparency around your science. If you go to the website, you're going to see lots of science. You're going to see a lot of peer-reviewed articles. You're one of the lead authors on many of those. And we live in this world where consumers are increasingly skeptical, not just of science, but of beauty claims. How do you balance that scientific accuracy with the need to really be clear about communicating benefits?
Yeah, this is a very challenging approach, and we are always seeking help, and we're evolving, getting better on that. The way we always approach when we're launching a product, we get the data first, and then we create the claims of this product based on the data that we have. So if we're saying that increased firmness, it's because we have the data in vitro that we have more collagen being produced. We have a clinical study that was measured that the firmness of the skin is improving. So the process of our claims, it's created data first, and then we get the claims. And then for communicating this to the consumers, to be able to approach more the consumers, we need to start with the claims that they are more familiar to listen to. And then if they want to go deep, every single claim they can find in our website, the substantiation of why we're saying that. So the process that we do, we first start with the science, create the claims, but then for the consumers, we try to show the claims first, a language that they understand better, and then go more deep in the science. We also, when we started to launch our first product, literally was only scientists in the team. So we started very heavily on showing first the science, and we're so proud of the science. We want to show, you see, it reduced inflammation by 45%, and this is good for your skin. That sometimes, like, it's interesting, and those graphs and those results and those data, it's interesting for a scientist, but can be so distant from a consumer that can scare the consumer. So we have been evolving to be more, okay, let's talk about what the consumer wants, right? They first want to see the benefits on their skin, and then we will educate why this benefit is attached to something that you cannot see, but it's happening because we have this technology.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty space is so noisy, and there are a lot of products that make claims that are confusing to consumers because some of them are marketing claims and then some of them are scientific claims. But what I found with OneSkin, and I was introduced to OneSkin word of mouth. When someone mentioned OneSkin to me, they actually sent me a paper first. Like, I didn't even get the website. I had gotten the paper that you wrote, and it was all the data in there. And I was like, okay, this is legit. This is actually very interesting to see. And OneSkin has owned this concept of cellular senescence, at least bringing it to the table, bringing it to the market. There are other companies that are using this language. How do you navigate when other companies, bigger brands, are talking about senescence? And how do you differentiate? Because it is a very complex hallmark. So we always think of you first. Anytime I hear senescence, I think of OneSkin. I think a lot of people do, but we'll love to hear how it helped OneSkin first get to specific audience, and how do you think about continuing to own this concept and differentiating from others who are trying to come in on senescence?
Yeah. We do see a lot on the longevity community, biotech community. They have been seeing OneSkin like for years, talking about cellular senescence and showing the papers and showing the results. So it's an audience that kind of, if they see another one, they will be more skeptical about what the other ones are saying than like what OneSkin. But the reality is that the beauty space is growing and more attention is given to the senescent cells, which I love. I love to see. I want to see more research on cellular senescence, more ways of targeting cellular senescence. And some companies are doing the research. Others are just using the buzzword just to get on the trend. I think, like, again, it all comes down to being able to prove and to show with transparency that claim and that result. So having all those scientific papers, that's like a proof that we did the research, that we are understanding what we're talking. A lot of companies will be having senescent cells, zombie cells on their claims, but if you will scroll their page, there is just words there. If there's research, they will be proud to show that. And I give credit to that. I think we will not be the only company in the world that will have a product targeting cellular senescence. But it's all about like seeing if that real research exists or if it's just words on a website.
Yeah, makes sense. So you guys made this biotech discovery, you identified this peptide, and we know, and we talk about it all the time, going from biotech discovery and scaling that into any kind of product, particularly a consumer product, is very challenging. Can you tell us, Alessandra, like what were the biggest challenges that you faced in moving from the lab to the beauty shelf? And what do you think would have made it easier or faster for you? What do you wish you knew along the way?
There's so many different types of challenges. I think for any entrepreneur that's trying to bring their product with science to the market, the product needs to target a clear need of the consumer, and they need to feel the results of that product, of using that product. So from starting to produce our first product and bring it to the market, as I mentioned in the beginning, we were still only scientists. So we started with the route of, we had no marketers, no one helping that much on marketing. And that was a hard thing, but also a positive thing. It was hard because we could not get to mainstream yet, but was good because we were on a niche type of consumers. They were loving to see what we were showing. But I think if we had someone in the beginning more helping us to make the science more easy and digestible, maybe the early days would be more easy for us to even to bring this word senescent cells to more people back in 2021 when we launched the product. So I feel that having more of like a marketing mindset, we did not have that for launching, but could have helped us to simplify our message in the beginning.
Hi, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business.
Yeah. There's a lot of learning, I'm sure, because there's a lot of different disciplines you're converging, right? You sit in this intersection of biotech, beauty, longevity science, and they're different domains. And so which of these worlds has been the hardest to convince when it comes to senescence and the science that's being derived or being generated at OneSkin? And how have you built trust across them, across beauty, across biotech and longevity?
So each of these spaces, they're interested in one thing. Like the beauty space, they want the before and afters. They want to see the clear result, the visible signs. That's what's more important. So if you don't have like that big difference on before and after, it's hard for them, oh, should I use this product or not? In the longevity, they understand more the hallmarks of aging and they understand more the long terms. And when we bring data that shows our body, one of our clinical studies that we show like, okay, if you're able to restore your skin barrier, you are also like reduce the inflammation systemically. That's longevity, and that's like really convince the longevity community. The biotech, it's a community that's driven on curing diseases. And that's a hard one because it was hard to show them that the importance of skin for the overall health. I remember in the beginning, before we launched the product, we were in this biotech space, and one colleague from another biotech company said to me, Alessandra, if you were launching a skincare product, why are you investing so much in research? And I was like, you're not getting it. It's because we needed the research. It's missing in that space. And they were like, use this resource to cure skin cancer. And I believe that if we keep our skin healthier, we may probably have less skin cancer in the future. So the biotech, I think it's hard because they are very in the mechanism and they want like more that state of curing something. So when we're talking about sometimes long-term for biotech can be a little bit challenging. So that's the challenge with biotech. I think the longevity community was the first one to be easier. And then the beauty, once you show good before and afters, you get the attention and you start educating, they get very interested on the longevity side of the skin.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things that we see, and OneSkin was a pioneer in this, was using a peptide to impart a function or to impart some kind of health benefit. And we've seen this kind of increase in peptides. My wife even said to me, everybody knows what peptides are. And then I asked her, what's a peptide? And she kind of knew, but not really. A lot of people don't know what peptides are, and yet you see it on all sorts of beauty products. Just thinking ahead, like if we were to have this conversation in 10 years, what do you think the role of peptides would be around cellular health, not just in skincare, but in this larger longevity movement?
Yeah, I think that peptides, it's an incredible category of molecule because it's extremely safe. It can give a message to the cells, communicate with the tissue to behave in a certain way. I see that peptides will be increasing in the beauty, but also on overall health for longevity, either if it's injectables or other ways of delivering peptides for other functions. What I do think it will happen in 10 years is that we will understand more how each person responds to the peptides and where they are on this longevity phase of your life. Because we talk a lot, okay, it's not that because I'm 38 years old that my body is biologically 38 years old. It can be a little bit younger or older depending on a lot of my habits and lifestyle. And different approaches with peptides can respond better or worse if that person needs more or less of what that peptide is doing. So I think more of that diagnostic and some measures of biomarkers to help people to, okay, these are the right peptides for you. These are the right doses. It's what the trend will be going on the next 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. That was the best explanation of peptides I have heard. Wow. It's so incredible. And I hope people heard that peptides send a message to cells to behave in a certain way. And the fact that, look, we talked about it before and you said it again, personalized therapeutics or products, personalized products are around the corner. And how does that scale up? That's a whole business question, but it is doable. I mean, once people start learning, yeah, this diagnostic approach, you can get assessed and that everyone's skin is different, then you can't like just ignore it and just take, one solution because it doesn't fit all. And this is great because it leads into my next question. And it's clear because beyond OneSkin, you're becoming quite the thought leader in longevity science communications. Brilliant. Where do you think science companies most often miss the mark in telling their science story to consumers or to investors?
I think a lot of time as the scientists and looking back to our journey, we are so focused on the details of the data, on like explaining small, this the control, this was the baseline, now what my product did. And it just lose the attention of either the consumer or investor. They want to know like, what's the endpoint result of that? And then you explain how the science helped to get to that endpoint. So in the beauty space, if you are not able to show that it will improve the appearance of the skin, and then you explain how it's improving, how different is this from the other products, you may lose the consumer when you start to say, hey, your senescence load is being reduced by 25%. And so I think it goes from being clear on the benefit that people will perceive, and then after that, explain the science. The benefit needs to come first, and then the science, the more digestible you can break down. And then you go into layers. There are layers of message. So once you educate the person, you can talk more deep. But if you start from the deep side of the science, you may lose a lot of interest in either investors or consumers.
Yeah, that is spoken like a true scientist who's had to take a product to the market. Unless you've done it, you might not have the idea. We talk about this all the time here at Messaging Lab. It's what keeps the lights on in our business. Scientists who need to be able to tell their story better. And Alessandra, you've lived it. So there's a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are young scientists, they're entrepreneurs. They're interested in translating this deep science like you guys did into everyday products. What's your advice? What would you tell them if they want to navigate both credibility and consumer appeal?
I think the credibility, if they're doing science, the credibility will exist because the science will give that. The thing is that science, is that solving a novel problem that people really need, that it's an unmet problem in the market, that there's no solution, you're better than the competitors. This needs to be very clear, because if you are doing something that's very similar to a competitor or no one wants, then it will be harder to you to break into the market. And the focus should be like on getting that product that will fill the need of the customer. And then the credibility, because if the science was done, the credibility will come after. So you don't need to worry that much about showing that piece first. but to really having a good product that people will want to use, that's easy to use, that they will see the benefits of using it.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing. Wow. Well said. I hope you guys heard that advice. Super important. Okay. Alessandra, this is the time of the interview where we have our quick fire questions. I wish we have a little song. Maybe, Karl, we have a little riff that goes do 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 do.
We might need to add that. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'll ask and Karl asks. So let's go. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is a really hard one, but again, quick fire. All right. So daily SPF or daily peptide? What's your true non-negotiable?
Daily peptide is my true non-negotiable. I never forget to apply my peptide, and it can have a day or other that I forget because I live in a place that there's not much UV index. Sometimes I can miss the SPF, but the peptide I never miss. So that's me.
Amazing. What's one skincare myth that you wish would disappear forever?
I think the main myth is that aging, it's a process that you don't have control and that it's just a phase. You have completely control over your aging process. It's more the lifestyle that will determine how you're aging. So keep the control of the aging process.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Next one. One book, podcast, or film that's recently inspired your science thinking.
So for that one, like I just came back from this conference, ARDD, that's Aging Research and Drug Discovery, that happened 2 weeks ago in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And there they were talking a lot about the level of the aging process in each person. That I mentioned a little bit like, okay, if I'm going to do any type of a senolytic intervention or any intervention to approach aging, I first need to understand where like my body is, because people that are accumulating more senescent cells, for example, they will benefit faster or they will need a different dose of a molecule compared to someone that's the same age, but probably accumulated less senescent cells. So that thinking about of understanding where we are and how we can get the right markers to measure that. This was not read in the book. It came from the conference, from a lot of the presentations and discussion, but something that since I came back, I'm thinking about and thinking about how this will impact the OneSkin as well in the future.
That's great. So before I ask the next quickfire question, could you just define for our listeners what you mean by senolytic? We know what it is, but there's a lot of people who listen who won't know what senolytic is.
So senolytics are a type of molecule that can eliminate senescent cells in the body. And it's already shown in animals that if you have an old animal with a lot of senescent cells and you apply a senolytic to that animal, that you can rejuvenate a lot of markers and you can delay diseases in that animal. So there's a lot of research of like, how we can improve longevity in humans already by applying these molecules, like would be supplements or something like that, to extend your health. And a lot of now its question is like, okay, the dose of this kind of molecules, it depends on how much senescent cells do you have or not. So a lot of these questions on how we can have biomarkers to identify that before doing any intervention, it's something that I'm thinking about.
That's amazing. Okay, so, you just came back from this conference, this aging and drug discovery conference, but what word best describes how you feel about aging right now, today?
Excited. I'm very excited about aging. I'm excited about life. I'm excited life get better every year. And if I'm feeling healthy and strong, life is good, right? So I'm very excited about aging. I'm excited that I'm in a time where all this research is happening and all these advancements is happening. So I think I'll get to 80, 85, 90, feeling strong and doing a lot of fun stuff and not be on a bed full of diseases.
Yes. And that's a beautiful vision. Okay. Now we're also ending with a very challenging quickfire question. So if you weren't in longevity science, what wild dream job would you pick?
Oh, wild. Okay. Let me say, one dream, when I wanted as a kid to be a scientist, I also wanted to be an actress. So, but that's not wild. I think
A scientist, that's a very different departure. Like science and acting are very different fields.
another thing, I wanted to be also an astronaut. I think like one day I can go out and see from the space the world. I still believe that maybe it will be possible for me to accomplish that as the evolution is going, like research on space and things like that. But I'm fascinated about the space.
You're talking Erum's language there.
Yes, I'm all into space. I'm not sure about going necessarily. I'll probably be like the 500,000th person. Like I want to see more people go through. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to do from a research standpoint when it comes to biology and space too, which is obviously very fascinating as well. Incredible. Well, this has been so much fun, Alessandra. We have first met you at SynBioBeta and we stayed in touch. And I'm a customer. I'm a big fan of OneSkin. And it's just wonderful to hear the story. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So we are like at OneSkin very inspired by the work of Messaging Lab. And we have already worked together. And we love to see like scientists that are helping people to communicate better the science. So thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing.
Stop.
Thank you.
Stop.
We're all fans of each other
Yes,
here.
I can't wait. All right. Love Fest. Amazing. I love it. Great note to end on.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. We'll see you later. So, Karl, what'd you think of that episode?
I'm a huge fan of OneSkin. I've been a huge fan for a really long time. And I was lucky enough to have Alessandra on a panel that I ran at SynBioBeta. And she was one of the people that I specifically wanted to invite because I'm just such a fan of what the company has done and how it's been built. And I love that she admitted they worked for like 4 or 5 years before they actually put a product on the market. But Erum, you actually knew about OneSkin before I did. Like I'd been following the science. How did you get introduced to OneSkin?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was actually in true Erum form, I was at an event, a longevity event, and it was one of the first ones I went to. And there was a young gentleman, Matt Sturgu. He works at Tempest. And I asked him, like, hey, what are some cool longevity products that are popular that you think I should try? And he's like, oh, OneSkin for sure. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he said that. And then he followed up with me and sent me a paper, a research paper that Alessandra co-authored about cellular senescence. And I was like, oh, what? And I read it and I'm like, okay, well, this is very interesting because it's not what you typically see in a skincare product, at least for me. Like I always get like the surface level like marketing and it's like anti-aging. And I'm like, okay, well, they're all saying the same thing. But this scientific paper really stood out. And then I was like, oh, I have to buy this. And so that was my introduction to OneSkin. And then, of course, when you buy it, then you start getting more ads. And then I started seeing this like following around OneSkin and these investors that put their money behind the company. And then, of course, then I started hearing about Alessandra and you started telling me about OneSkin from your scientific research. And I was like, wow, this is a really cool brand. Just the people around it, the concept, this looking at this hallmark of aging cellular senescence. And that was the first time I was introduced to the concept of cellular senescence. And now it's like all over the place. Maybe it's because we are doing the research. So if you listener, if you know other companies that are highlighting cellular senescence, if this is your first time hearing about it, we would love to know. From our research, we started seeing like other big brands talk about it. But I would say OneSkin is the first brand to really own cellular senescence. And hopefully they continue to do so because they are doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah, they were definitely the pioneers. And I think I've pointed it out to you a couple times. And when I go into the cosmetic section or I take a trip into Sephora, which I will do because I like to see what is on the shelves, I see a lot of people on their branding write longevity or cellular senescence. So we are seeing those terms out there. But I think her interview was so great. And I love hearing the story of how they have built the company and the brand. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this evolves over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just like loved her story about her research and how she entered the field of science because she wanted to clone her family. She's so curious. That's why she's a kindred spirit with us. And like, hello, the definition of peptides. To be honest with you, at first, when I was looking at peptides, like last year, when I was like really trying to wrap my head around it, because we started hearing about it in the biohacker world, it was like, all right, amino acids coming together, like what does it do? But when Alessandra said peptides are basically a message to cells in order to behave a certain way, I was like, that's amazing. Cellular communications and a peptide being a message. It's a text message. It's like, okay, stop senescing, or like do this thing, do that thing. So that I think hopefully gives more consumers, and I know this message will come out from OneSkin, but to scrutinize the peptides and say, what message is this peptide trying to tell my cells, before you just blindly use a peptide. And it's like, maybe it's telling you a message you don't need and you're spending all this money. Maybe the peptide's telling your skin to hydrate more, but that's not your problem.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the world of peptides, and you will see these ingredients on a lot of products. And I think it's really up to us to scrutinize what those peptides are and what they do to us, or are supposed to do to us. But we'll explore that more in upcoming episodes.
So with that, we're excited about these upcoming episodes. We're going to keep digging into the world of biotech and how it's transforming every single industry. And then you guys, next week, we'll have Phil Morrill of Main Sequence Adventures. You recorded that episode. I was not there. I'm so excited to hear it. And you gave me a little teaser, but it was about really orchestrating innovation into companies, to larger companies, which is going to be exciting. And then it's our 150th episode. I cannot believe it, that we have gotten this far. And that means we're just going to work harder, and we're going to bring you all the hard-hitting news when it comes to biotech transforming every industry.
Like and subscribe on YouTube. Send us a message and let us know your take on peptides and what's happening in the world of biotech. We love hearing from our listeners.
Awesome. That's the pod. End scene.